Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And for this closing session, please welcome Mr. Chun Singh, Minister of Education.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Minister, thank you very much for taking time out to be with us this evening. We have had 3 panels on the general theme of education as an agent of transformation. When we think of the Middle East, we generally think of war, violence, conflict, terrorism. And of course, that's part of the Middle Eastern reality. And the last almost 9 months focus on the war in Gaza, which is tragic, which is horrific, but in the long run may not be the most important thing that's happening in the Middle East. I at least think that the most important thing in the long run are the efforts of mainly the Gulf states, but not just the Gulf states, to transform their societies. And of course, education is going to be a big part, a big agent of change in all countries. And that's why we are very grateful to you, Minister, for taking time off to be with us, because you are the Education Minister. So I don't want to waste time, because people are not here to listen to me, they're here to listen to you. So let me just kick this off, asking you to reflect aloud on the role of education in Singapore's development story.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, actually, I have Siu Hong here. In case I missed out anything, my former Director General Education will be most able to fill in the blanks. But if I have to recall our own journey since 1959 or 1965, wherever you start, I think we can divide it into broadly 3 stages in our education development. The first stage was very simply economic survival. We needed to earn our keep. We needed to make sure that we have enough jobs for our people, especially with the urgency of being independent overnight. And then soon after that was the British withdrawal east of the Suez. And I always remember when they moved out of Sembawang Air Base, my grandparents became unemployed, or together with 20% of fellow Singaporeans. So the first stage was economic survival, and that we have to uplift the general education level very quickly. And we continue to do that all the way until about the 1980s, 1990s. Now, once we have established that foundation, then I would say that we were able to focus a bit more on the second stage. And then we went on to the early years, which means the preschool years. And we have, over the last 15, 20 years, invested much more in the early stage child's development programs, especially for the children from the less privileged background. So I would say that that's roughly the second stage, the kindergartens, the childcare, the maternity programs, and so on and so forth. Now, I think we are embarking onto the third stage for the last 5-10 years, and that is about lifelong education. And that is about not just defining success for our education system of how well our students do for their first 15 years of their life within our school system, but how well they continue to do to remain relevant, stay competitive in the next 50 years of their life beyond the school system. So that would be what I consider as a broad 3-stage trajectory just for discussion. And that's how we have organized ourselves. And the methods are all quite different. In stage 1, you all probably know and are familiar with the Goh Keng Swee report, where we adopted a system approach to uplift the general education level, and to bring up the average, if you like, to bring up the average. And for all the criticisms, I think we generally were able to do that quite quickly for the bulk of our population. The second stage was slightly different dimension because it was about early childhood education and how we prepare our students for school, how we develop their social emotional competencies and some of the other attributes that allows them to have a stable foundation to learn. And that was important for us. Now the third stage, we are entering a new era, a new set of challenges. We are facing a new set of challenges because technology is changing fast and our people have to keep learning. No matter what we teach our people in school, it will never be sufficient for the rest of their life. And the most important skill set, as I always advocate, is the ability of our students to keep learning. Having the curiosity, the zest to keep learning, and learning to learn becomes a core competency. And this is a stage that brings about different challenges and opportunities. But at the same time, with all the new technology and AI, today we are also entering a stage whereby instead of mass education, we can try to achieve mass customization or mass personalization of education. Why is that a fundamental change compared to the past? In the past, because of resource constraints, we, in my words, always say that we have an education trilemma. You can try to achieve scale, quality, or affordability. It's very hard to achieve all three. It's very hard to do mass personalization, where you cater your education to the needs of the respective individual. So we teach to the average. But teaching to the average always have this challenge where 50% will find it too easy, 50% will find it too tough. But today with technology, you can try to break that trilemma, of achieving scale, quality, and affordability. Because with technologies like adaptive learning system, AI, you can actually scale quality programs and yet customize it to the respective individuals. So to me, that's a tremendous opportunity in our next stage of our education journey. And if we can truly achieve that, then we will be able to truly bring out the best in each and every one of our students, and not just stay at the level of teaching to the average and lifting the average. But now you lift the average, lift the bottom, you stretch the top.
Thank you, Minister. I want to unpack what you said a little bit and go into a couple aspects a bit deeper. I think most Singaporeans would understand why we chose English as basically the language of education, language of administration in Singapore. But perhaps for the benefit of our foreign friends, could you reflect a bit on the role of English in our educational system and why has it been important?
Okay, so I would make two sets of comments on the choice of English. I think it was for a very practical reason that we chose English. We could have chosen Chinese because that was the language of the majority. We could have chosen Malay because that was the language of the region, right? We could have chosen many other languages, perhaps even, but I thought the founding leaders thought it was a very practical decision on two counts. One, to choose English as the language that will connect us with the rest of the world. Two, English is also considered a neutral language that allows us to bring our people from diverse backgrounds together. So these were perhaps the two very practical reasons that we chose English. Now that's the first part about why we chose English and how we have benefited from that choice. But I would say a second aspect of it, it's not just about which language we chose, it's about consistency. Consistency in implementing and executing. Very often, I have foreign friends that ask us, what is the secret sauce of our education system and so on and so forth. And one of the things that people generally underappreciate is the fact that it is not about sophisticated policies that matters most. It is about clear, simple policies, but consistently executed that is most important. And in Singapore, we have the good fortune to not only have chosen English, but also to have been able to consistently apply that across time, across the different segments of society, to bring our people together, to connect with one another and to connect with the world. But the consistency in application is very important, because there are examples elsewhere whereby people have chosen, but when the choices keep changing, then you don't have the consistency to allow things to manifest.
Thank you. To push that a little bit further, you mentioned one of the reasons was to connect with the world. It's a very practical reason for development, right? Now, one of the themes that came through from today's discussion was the importance of practical education, vocational education, education that is tied to much more directly to industry, to development, and so on. I don't think we have completely overcome the academic bias that exists in many countries, in the Gulf, in Southeast Asia, in India, in the West even. Right? But can you reflect a bit on how we tried to overcome this and tie our educational system to the economic needs, the development needs?
Well, I would mention perhaps 2 points for us to consider. First, it is true in many societies, particularly Asian societies, there is a certain premium placed on academic qualifications, degrees, and so forth. But this is not a bias that is cultural per se. I think it is the Asians, including the Chinese, the Indians, the Southeast Asians, Malays, they're very practical. The question is not the bias towards one or the other. The real question is, whatever I do, what economic value will it translate into? And today, if we look at it today, while we try to overcome that bias, people are also asking a very practical question. If I take on this vocational training or I take on this particular skills set, how does it help me to earn a better wage? Right? So today, we have a challenge because not just in Singapore, but many places, people resort to degrees, diplomas as a signal of people's abilities and skills. So actually, it's a signaling device rather than the skills or the attributes. But today, increasingly, you also find many enlightened companies that are looking at their employees not based on their credentials, but based on their skill sets. And that, I think, will help to reshape the perception towards whether we call it academic education or vocational education. And in fact, in the era of AI, one can argue that many years ago at the Industrial Revolution, maybe with steam power and whatnot, people who use their muscles and manpower become relatively less value. People who use their, I suppose, academic credentials become more value. But now you may find another change whereby it's not just about what you know in terms of knowledge, but how able you are to create new value propositions that matter even more. Things that humans can do that AI cannot easily replicate. So we might be at the threshold of that. So that's one part of the answer to your question. The other part, on a very practical way of how we try to promote vocational training and make it of value, and that has to be done very closely with the companies. I always remember these stories when I was young, this story about EDB, the Economic Development Board of Singapore, that in the past, it takes EDB maybe a couple of months, years to attract an investment. By the time they come, they will take 1 to 2 years to build the factory. But in the 1 to 2 years to build the factory, we would use the 1 to 2 years to prepare the workers to go into the factory. So it's a just-in-time concept, if you like. Buildings, materials ready, workers ready. And that is a very practical proposition, because when people say that I go for this vocational training, it's not training in the abstract. They are training with a clear goal to say that I will join a certain company or a certain trade. And that encourages people to take on that trade. And even today, I would say that the same concept applies. If we ask a young person to say that you go in and do this vocational training and trade or acquire this trade craft or whatsoever, they very often will ask you, so which company is going to employ me? That's why in a lot of vocational training, we prefer not to do vocational training in isolation. We prefer to partner companies. Because once you partner companies, there's a confirmed offtake. So in many countries, when they say that they would like to, if you like, inverted commas, import our vocational training system, our suggestion is always, don't just import our vocational training system. Instead, work with companies that are already in your country, have them partner with you, so that the students who are going through your system knows and have the confidence that there will be an offtake for their qualifications or skill sets. And to me, looking around of the various examples that we have worked with others, that's the most useful example to encourage a change in the perception of how they see the value of vocational training, because people are ultimately practical. Will I get a job? Will I get a good job? Does this job give me a sense of progression? Last but not least, of how we try to change the mindset in Singapore. In the past, we have many vocational training institutions. In fact, we call them VITB, the Vocational Institute Training. And we have them spread out across, but the quality was not even, and it all depends on the leadership and so on and so forth. But over time, we consolidated them, we leveled up the institutions, and today, many people who have visited our Institute of Technical Education, or ITE, would think that there are some community colleges or even better facilities than some of the community colleges. And there's a reason for us to do that. Today, if you go to ITE, you will find the place Spick and Span. And there is a reason for us to do that. And the reason is because we want to inculcate a certain respect for people who go to ITE. And we want the people who goes to ITE even to have that respect for themselves. In fact, one of the very important things that in ITE we always spend a lot of time with our students is this. Never look down on yourself. If you believe in yourself, others people will believe in you. So it's not just about the infrastructure hardware that we have to upgrade, modernize, and so forth. But very importantly is to inculcate that respect for trade crafts. And when you go to a place, this is what we call the opposite of the broken window syndrome. You go to a place where the windows are broken everywhere, then you have a certain mindset. But if you go to a place where you Spick and Span, where things are organized and people are respected, then you acquire a different disposition, which is important when we go out to work. So I think there's no one single way that we can overcome this bias against vocational training in many countries, but there are things that we can do on a very practical ways in terms of linking up employment opportunities with training. There are very practical things that we can do in terms of shaping the environment and culture of how people who go into vocational training are treated and respected.
Thank you. Mr. Wong spoke very passionately about teachers, because of course teachers, you can't have a good education without teachers. And I think we all can agree that teaching in Singapore is a respected profession. I'm a bit biased because my family is a family of teachers, except me. Right? But
You are also a teacher in some way.
Okay. How did we do this? I mean, is it because a cultural thing? Because in most Asian cultures, I think teachers are generally respected. Was it an economic thing because we pay our teachers well? Is it some combination? Because if you look around the world, some of the very developed countries, teaching is not a respected profession. Not at the primary or secondary level, maybe at the university level. So even at the university level, they are not very well rewarded. So what is the secret, if there was a secret?
There is a secret, but it's not such a secret that only we all know. In fact, we thought that was the most important ingredient, and it was validated by what the OECD reports found across various countries. The pay is important, the working conditions are important. All these, what I call hygiene factors, are important. Must not get it wrong. We benchmark the pay of our teachers to the market, meaning that for comparable quality of people from the same cohort that comes and join us in the teaching service, we make sure that they are paid competitively compared to people who have otherwise not joined us. In terms of working environment, we try to provide them with a progressive environment, so on and so forth, and I think that's also important. But I would say that these are hygiene factors. There are two more important factors in order to have a quality teaching force. The first is that the teacher must have a sense of professional pride, agency. They must feel that they are here for a higher purpose and not just a cog in the wheel. They must feel that while they pour their hearts out to take care of our children, they themselves must be growing. And there are opportunities for them to grow, because you cannot pour your hearts out when you don't feel as if you are growing. So I always jokingly ask my teachers, especially those who have served very long, I say, did you serve 20 times 1 year or 1 times 20 years? You understand what I mean? If you serve 20 times 1 year, you will soon get tired. But if you serve 1 times 20 year, and the next year will be 1 times 21 year, and you keep growing professionally, personally, then no matter how hard the work is, or how hard the work may be, you will keep going. So that to me is professional development for our teachers. That sense of professional pride and development is important. But the most important factor in my mind, validated by my colleagues in MOE, validated by OECD, that the real secret sauce to get quality teachers in any society is the societal respect for teachers. Having said that, it doesn't mean that Singapore has gotten everything right. In fact, there are warning signs across the world. When societies loses respect for their teaching profession, no good people will want to join their teaching profession. I shall not name various countries. I have spoken to my counterparts in various countries. Consistently, when their PISA score starts to go down, it is because they lose the quality teaching force. They start losing their quality teaching force that they used to have because good people no longer want to join them. Good people no longer want to join them because the society no longer respect the teaching professions. And sometimes we are all, as members of the public, are guilty of this. Somehow we think that just because we are more educated, that we have various degrees, masters, and even PhD, that we will be a better teacher. But that is a mistake. Being a teacher is both a practice of art and science. It doesn't mean that just because I'm more educated, I can be a better teacher. And that respect for the teaching profession ultimately determines whether we can inspire the next generation to join the teaching force. Which is why in Singapore, I will jealously defend the professional pride and professional agency of my teachers. Because I believe that, to me, is the most important factor. More important than even the infrastructure, the technology, the policies that we can have. But I can't do that alone because I need the whole society to join hands to respect our teachers' professions. When teachers get harassed, when teachers get chased around doing not purposeful work, they get demoralized. When teachers are not treated with respect, they get demoralized. But when teachers are respected, no matter how hard they work and how hard they have to work to uplift the most challenging students, they will continue to do it and do it well. So that's our beliefs, and I think that's validated by the experiences of my counterparts across different countries.
Thank you. I want to leave some time for questions from the audience, both online here, but I have a few more questions which I cannot resist the temptation since I have the mic and there's a captive audience to ask you. You mentioned the PISA scores, right? This morning, Madam Halima did us the honor of opening the conference. And she mentioned that we have emerged top in critical thinking, which again goes against the stereotype of the Singapore education system. We are widely acknowledged to be very good at certain things, but always criticized, or at least used to be criticized, that we're not critical thinkers. Now, I think sometimes when people talk about critical thinking, they say, if I say black, you must say white, and vice versa. That's not critical thinking, that's just being contrarian. Okay? But too often it's mistaken. So, what is critical thinking, and how did we succeed in getting our kids, our students to think critically?
Strangely, I just answered this question an hour ago.
Okay. No, it's not a conspiracy. I
In
didn't.
a different forum, I happen to just come from the Singapore Institute of the Singapore International Chamber of Commerce. So we had this same question. So I will say a couple of things to put things in context. Yes, I know many rankings have ranked our education system very highly. I'm very proud of our accomplishments. I'm eternally grateful to my teachers and the teaching profession for bringing us where we are. But we all in the education system, we will be the first one to remind ourselves not to drink our own Kool-Aid too much and take all matrices with a pinch of salt. In life, sometimes many important things cannot be measured. But in life, we should avoid making important only things that we can measure. For us to know whether our education system has done well or not is beyond whether we do well for the PISA score, the PIRLS score. PIRLS is the reading and literacy score, or the creativity test and so forth. All those are useful benchmark and signals, but I think from MOE's perspective, we have a broader perspective of how we define success for the individual and for the country. At the individual level, our definition of success is, have we ignited that zest, the curiosity to learn for life, to keep improving for life? As a society, have we embraced the diversity of strengths and allow it to flourish so that we are more resilient collectively? So that's my first point that I will make. The second point is that, are we creative or not creative? In fact, I polled the audience. I shall not do the same thing here. I polled the audience. What do you mean by creativity? Even the definition of creativity is not easily agreed upon. But I will say this. Whatever the definition of creativity, yes, we may not have the Bill Gates of the world and we may not have the Mozarts of the world, but that is just one dimension of spectacular achievements. But if you ask the Japanese, they have a slightly different perspective. They will say that, that daily, constant micro improvements, they all add up, and sometimes they all add up even more than that one's Big Bang bright spark moment. And you need a combination of both, right? In any society, in any point in history. But to me, creativity is not about just waking up and the light bulb coming on. Creativity is a disciplined pursuit or disciplined inquiry into issues, problems, and trying to find new and innovative solutions that can value add. So I know recently there's an article by Sandra in the Straits Times about creativity, whether is it the big C, the small c. It doesn't really matter whether is it the big C or the small c. The real important thing is, do we have that spirit of inquiry, that disciplined pursuit of new solutions that can value add? And if we want to be creative, then a few ingredients need to come about in our education system. First, we won't become creative unless we have a deep understanding of the context that we are in, the environment that we work in, the cultures, the systems that people operate in, the fears, concerns, and aspirations of the partners that we are working with. So it's a deep understanding and appreciation of what is beyond us. Then the second part is, do we have the gumption to create new value propositions, to turn constraints into opportunities, as Singapore always want to pride ourselves? For example, today, whether is it on the geopolitical front with the more contested environment, or on the economic front, which is a more fragile economic environment and global system, or on the social front, which is a more fractious domestic scene across the world, do we have the ability and the gumption to come out with new perspective, propositions, solutions that help us to bridge differences and transcend? So I'm not so fixated about whether we have the big or the small c. I'm more interested whether our people have that gumption for disciplined pursuit of ways to overcome challenges. And I always say that there are 3 ways this thing comes about. One is to apply what you call creativity to solve problems. 2 is to apply what you call creativity to preempt problems. Now that's a higher order. Level 3 is to apply your creativity to unlock potential by being able to look at the system, review the system, redefine the system to unlock the potential of people. So there are different ways of looking at creativity. There are different dimensions of what we want to achieve with creativity. But common to all is that disciplined pursuit of knowledge to create new value propositions, new connections that otherwise don't exist today. Otherwise, in today's world, the knowledge is increasingly commoditized. We are not about to answer yesterday's or today's question with yesterday or today's answer. Our challenge is to encourage our people to ask tomorrow's questions ahead of time and to find those answers ahead of time. To me, that is creativity. I don't know whether you can measure that, but I think we all will seem to know it when we see it. Yeah, so
Thank you, Minister. Now my really final question, then the audience will get your chance. I'd like you to reflect a bit on our civic education, the role of education in nation building. How I think all societies face this problem in one way or the other. How do you balance your own traditions, your own traditional values, with the needs of modernity? And it's a tricky thing because values are not static. Even traditional values evolve, right? But how do we see this problem? How do we try to meet it? I don't think there's a solution. And what lessons can our friends from the Gulf, who are also struggling, I believe, with this issue, take from our experience?
well, the way I will answer this is actually, it's the same philosophy as how we have approached our language policies. Okay, let me explain why I say there are some similarities and parallels. You see, in many countries, when you are asked to choose a language as your lingua franca, you have one of 2 ways to do so, on 2 extremes. One is that you erase all the past and the diversity, and you go for one and only one. The other way, the other extreme is that we all do our own things, and we all try to coexist together, but we don't really come together. This is the same in urban planning, in urban societies. This is the same in language. This is also the same in what Bilahari was talking about. How do you mesh different perspectives together? We, in our language policy, just like many other things, have chosen the hardest of all paths, and it's none of the 2 above. We didn't go for a policy that erased the past and homogenized everything. Neither did we say to each your own and you live by yourself and we live and let live and may it be so. Instead, we have chosen the most difficult of paths in the middle to say that while we may not be united by a common past, we can always be united by a common future. And upon our diverse past, we build our common future. In fact, we draw strengths from our diverse past, diverse languages, to build something that overcomes, something that transcends. And that is the Singapore way. So when it comes to appreciating history, education plays a very important role. Because we are not here to say that there's only one interpretation. We can share with our students the diverse interpretations, and we want them to appreciate the diverse interpretation, the diverse cultures, the diverse language. It is not about being judgmental to say who is right and who is wrong, who is stronger and who is weaker, who is superior and who is inferior. It is to appreciate that diversity of strengths, the diversity of backgrounds, but most importantly, to be able to transcend that and build something common in the future. So in Singapore, while we may all come from different races, background, socio-economic background, but we are united by a set of values or ethos: multiracialism, multiculturalism, meritocracy, incorruptibility. That's why I always say, while we may not have a common past, we can always have a shared future. And that is the power of education in helping people to appreciate the diversity of views, uniting people for a common cause. We are not looking for homogeneity. In fact, we appreciate a diversity of strengths. And in a more uncertain world, the greater the need for the diversity of strengths to cater to the different environments. So that would be how I see the role of education. To bring people together, to transcend, and not to bring people together to cling on to their past and divide.
Thank you. Now let's take some questions from the audience. I just asked you to do two things. One is to identify yourself, and two, to make sure it's a question and not a speech in disguise. Thank you. Oh yeah, Anthony. Oh, sorry, you were first. Sir. I think it's on, just.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the wonderful speech. On the context of...
Could you identify yourself, please?
To introduce myself, my name is Chong YouTube. I'm a recent MPB graduate from LKY School. In the recent PhD, Singapore has been consistently ranked #1, especially in the creative thinking skills this year. Last year in maths, reading, and science. So as a minister, I'm just curious to know about what are the, as you look back 20 years from now, what legacy would you like to leave behind as a minister? Thank you.
This is an easy question. The way I answer is to share with you a story. A lot of people always like to ask ministers, what do you like to leave behind? What's your greatest achievement? I have never agreed to give anything about 100 days interview or anything of that sort. I grew up in the military. I was brought up by one perm sec called Mr. Lim Siong Kwan. His definition of success for us was that you raise the capability, you never have to use it, you retired the capability, and nobody knew you had it. But more pertinent to answer your questions, I sought the advice of my predecessors before I took over this role. One of my eminent predecessors, who's still in cabinet, told me and asked me to remember this. Whatever good that happens during my time as the education minister, I should give thanks to my predecessors. Whatever bad happens after my time as education minister, I should take responsibility quickly. I have the distinct privilege of having 5 to 7 ex-minister of education in my cabinet still. We never measure our success by what we do. And I think if we start with that premise, we won't be where we are. I may be the education minister for 3 years. I have in my cabinet the experience of 25 years and more of education ministers. Because education is a lifelong endeavor. Never think that in our short stint of 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years, that we should claim that we have done so and so for our system. The Chinese have a good saying, right? 10年树木，百年树人. 10 years to grow a tree, 100 years to groom an individual. And our role in education is never to define success and contributions by our individual moves. It is to look at it as a system where continuity, simplicity, consistency in execution is the most important. So that will be my indirect way of answering your question.
Thank you. Anthony?
Mr. Minister, could I draw your attention to what Lee Kuan Yew said in 1966? He said, "The good teacher is the teacher that the student remembers. That teacher should get a gold medal. Now, in convocations and all, most of the prizes go to the leading students. So at NTU, they create a scholarship for the best student who will give the scholarship to his teacher who inspired him, and the teacher will sponsor a student to come to NTU. And that seems to me like a little bit more creative. But the two features come in, teacher and student. And it also has regionality. So you come to a public school normal number 3 in Chongqing, and the teacher is honored. And from that school, the student comes to NTU. And it's endowed about 10 million. So the scholarship is substantial.
Thank you for your comment. I fully agree with you and hope more of the kind philanthropic people will also join hands with us to honor our teachers and the teaching profession.
Thank you. I can't hear you. Can you speak closer to the mic?
The mic is on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Chun. I'm the founder of Global Summit on Sustainable Agriculture, a graduate of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. If I'm not wrong, I remember, Minister, you ever said social mobility is more important than social equality. Yeah, I ever heard you said this during your speech. I totally agree. It may not be politically so right, but it is a truth. My question is that are you satisfied with the current social mobility in Singapore? Especially, I want to talk about it within the public sector, because we still see those who are with scholarships mobilize more easily. Yeah. So, what are the key challenges for those who are not with good educational background can enter public sector and mobilize easily? Yeah. Thank you.
There were two questions in there, so I make two sets of comments. One, I think what you meant was when I say that while social inequality is a big challenge for many societies, including Singapore, social immobility must also, if not, is an even bigger issue that we must be concerned with. Because in any society, there will be people who are rich and there are people who are poor. But regardless of whether you are rich or whether you are poor, you must have hope. You must have hope that you can do better for yourself, for your family. And that is what keeps human beings going, right? It's not just about being rich or poor. It is about a sense of hope. And in every society, how do you provide a sense of hope for your people, regardless of the background? Success is not monolithic and similarly defined for everybody from different backgrounds. But success can be that regardless of your starting point, you are able to progress for yourself and for your family. That's what we mean by social mobility, right? Absolutely so. Not about relative, because relative can be a zero-sum game, but absolutely so. In Singapore, we pride ourselves that we want to keep a system whereby anyone, regardless of your background, so long as you are capable and you are prepared to work hard, you will have the chance to succeed. Your financial background, your economic background should not be a constraint to your abilities to achieve for yourself and for your family. Perhaps I am an example and a product of the system. I come from a single parent family. I took a bursary from primary school all the way through to secondary school. I would probably not have completed my education system if not for the support given to me by the system, by many kind philanthropic organizations, charitable individuals, and we all support those who are able to keep moving forward. Is there a measure for us in this? Depending on your school of thought, some people measure and have measured and say that if you are born the poorest 20% in one generation, what's your chance of reaching the top 20% in one generation? If you use that matrix, Singapore has not done too badly. But that doesn't mean that we are walking on water. There will always be challenges. You compare to many other established societies, we are still much more socially mobile compared to others. But we don't take that as a given, because across history, across time, as societies matures, there is a risk that things might ossify because the networks are formed differently and may not be distributed evenly, which is why we work so hard to make sure that beyond the sharing of means and financial resources to uplift those who most need it, we also need to make sure that there are opportunities, networks that our people can have access to regardless of their background. And this is the reason why I have gone around to tell many of the illustrious alumni from the illustrious school to share their networks. It is one thing to go back to your school and give back to your school. That is commendable. It is even more commendable if you come from a privileged background to go to a less privileged school or people with a less privileged background and share the same networks, mentorship opportunities to guide them, so that beyond the financial means, the financial assurance that they can complete their education, they can have the assurance that there will be opportunities for them. And that is a collective responsibility and collective endeavor beyond just what the Ministry of Education will do in terms of financial support. And we need the collective strengths of society to do that. So that's the first part of your question on social mobility. Sorry, you want to clarify your second part of the question, exactly what you want me to
Okay,
answer?
let me be clear. I know many friends who are civil servants, they also complain, if you are not a scholar, you will not be easily promoted within the public sector in Singapore.
Okay, the answer to this is actually quite straightforward. Scientifically, some of these things is called survival bias. I don't know whether you all understand what this term is. Let me ask this question. Supposing you are a company and you give out scholarships to 10 persons, hoping that you will groom your future CFO, COO, or CEO, supposing. And supposing after 20 years, you look back at your record, and having given the scholarship, your chances of selecting a good CEO is no different between those who have given the scholarship versus those who have not given the scholarship. What would you conclude? What would be your conclusion?
Okay, my conclusion is that, I was educated from the Economic School of Public Policy. Okay, when we go back to our home country, our chance to be promoted actually is higher. It's higher.
No, my question is very simple.
My question is that actually look
No,
back.
I'm coming to that,
okay.
because I explain what I mean by survival bias. You gave out 10 scholarships. Would you be happy if after 20 years, your 10 is no different from the 10 others that, what you call the control group that you have not selected? You'll be quite disappointed with yourself, right? Because you have spent money and opportunities, right? But on the other hand, now we flip the question around. Supposing out of your 10 that you have selected, 7 of them made it. Are you happy or sad?
Yeah, happy, right?
You're happy. Then can I criticize you for being elitist? Because you have chosen 7 from your 10. What about the rest who you have not chosen? So what do I mean by this? Actually, this happens in any and every organization. You try to invest in the people, you try to make sure that they succeed, and you give them opportunities and so forth. If they succeeded, you are happy. But you are also sure that not everyone will succeed. But if none of them succeed, or your batting average, as we call it crudely, is no better than not doing anything, are you any happier? But if your batting average is not bad, and then after that you get criticized, then I think it's a different story. But then you ask yourself the other question. In mathematics, we call it both the type 1 and type 2 error. Those whom you have selected, who don't make it, is one sort of error. Those whom you have not selected, but should have been selected, is another type of error. In all management and grooming talent development system, you try to minimize the errors on both types. But the more important thing is for every individual, whether they feel a sense of fairness. Sense of fairness in the sense that if you, regardless of your background, whether you take a scholarship or not take a scholarship, when you perform, are you judged on the same yardstick? If you are not judged on the same yardstick and your system is not meritocratic, then we are in trouble. And why would we choose to run a system that's not meritocratic? Why I say survival bias? So I give you my example. A lot of people say that, oh, you are a scholar and you become a minister. Can I be frank that in my batch, many people did not become ministers? Should we be happy or sad? We invested in them, but they didn't turn out as perhaps they didn't meet the high expectations that the society has. So all I'm saying is that in any talent development system, we must manage this. You try your best. If you have the resources, you will spread your resources more to develop as many people as you can, as this is what we are doing. But no matter how much resources you have, you will try to invest in some whom you think have higher potential, be it in a company or in a country. When they have succeeded, you should be happy. When they have not succeeded, you kick yourself and ask whether you have chosen the wrong one. But you should not accuse those who have succeeded with your help as being somehow unfairly lifted. It would be rather paradoxical, right? Surely you are not advocating that we end up with a system whereby those who have given scholarships, the results are no different from those who we didn't give a scholarship. Then people will call into question, if you are the public, you'll be asking us, what are we doing? Right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. My name is Moaz Hayat. I'm a visiting PhD researcher working on ASEAN diplomacy from Cambridge University. I'm interested in understanding your thoughts on how Singapore's success in its education system nationally has impacted its regional standing within Southeast Asia. And do you think there's more Singapore could do more broadly in terms of helping its other ASEAN member state partners build up their own education systems and support their development as well?
First point I would say, please do not think that Singapore should go around and tell other people what to do. Every society has their own needs and their own context. Whenever people come and ask me and say, what can I copy from your system for ours? I always tell them not to do this without adult supervision at home. Neither do we copy other people's system just by picking up what we think are good elements. Every system must be looked at it in totality, in context. We don't just pick and choose certain ideas. For example, I say that I have the privilege of 20 years, 25 years of ministers of education experience in my cabinet. That is a privilege that I have, that my society has. But that is not something that can be replicated anywhere else when it comes to consistency of execution. So the first thing I must declare is that I am not in the school of thought that I think Singapore should go around and teach other people what to do. Everybody has to decide what they must do for themselves in context. That's one. On the other part of your question, my answer is this. Neither do I think that the Singapore system is so good and perfect that we have no room to improve. In fact, I will be the first one to tell you that despite the high averages that we have achieved for reading, literacy, creativity, and what else, I would like to see some other dimensions of my students being developed, which is what we are doing now. I want more of our students to be globally exposed, to understand the world, their perspectives, which are not necessarily the same as us. Chances are that they are different, to appreciate the diversity of views and perspective. Because if we want to be a connector, we want to be a bridge builder, we need to understand in depth other people's perspective. That is what I think I would like to see many more of my students going overseas, not just to the well-trodden path. I have this challenge for all my university students, for those who all my IHLs, they will know this. I say, it doesn't bother me as much where you go, whether is it a trodden path or a less trodden path. All I ask for every Singaporean student who has the privilege to go overseas, is to come back and bring back one new idea or perspective to help enrich us. If every Singaporean student that can go overseas bring back one fresh perspective, one new insight from where they have been, then I think we will be much better in being a bridge builder, a connector in a very troubled and fragmented world. If they can go to companies big and small, successful and not so successful, and bring back one lesson to help us, then I think we'll be much better. So I don't profess that we can or should teach other people what to do. I think we are also learning from other people. I always tell people that I'm always very impressed by some of the education systems in ASEAN. They may not have achieved the level of accomplishments that we have, but they do have a lot of value add for what they spend and how they have invested. And I look at the value add, the outcomes. Right? I look at the outcomes. For me, a very important measure of success is the value add, the outcomes. Right? Some are more privileged, they are able to spend more, they achieve certain results. But look closely at those who are not so privileged and yet are able to defy the odds and achieve beyond what people expect them to. I have a lot of respect for various ASEAN countries' education system or pockets of their education system. I shall not name one or the other because that will cause... for everyone that I name, I will be asked why didn't I name the others. But I can tell you that I'm actively looking at some of my counterparts, how they do things, and what we can learn from them.
Thank you. We are running out of time, but we have time for one last question, and there's one last person. That's you.
Afternoon, Minister. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Joel. I'm from SMU. From your sharing today, I gathered that diversity in Singapore is crucial to facilitate a robust learning environment. But I also understand that this diversity is beneficial only because it is premised on good faith, on shared understanding, on cooperation between the different facets of society. So in the case that there are conflicts or clashing of narratives in Singapore, be it due to local or foreign events, I am quite curious to understand and find out more about the deconflicting mechanisms and measures that our education system has in place to sort of facilitate this set of discourse, as well as to emerge from this particular conflict of narratives, should it happen now or in the future.
Well, there are two parts to the answer that I will share. First, there are a lot of troubles in the world. We cannot solve all the troubles, and neither are we in the position to adjudicate everything that's happening in other parts of the world. But having said that, it's very important for us to understand the source of the conflict, the source of the disagreement. Then ask ourselves purposefully, what can we do to help bridge it? What can we do to help transcend it? That's very important. And that comes with a deep respect for the diversity of perspective out there. That is not just about the Singapore's perspective, it's about the diverse perspective out there. I'm not asking you to choose sides or one or the other, or adjudicate one is right and the other is wrong. I'm saying that different parties have different perspective, and for us to earn our keep, we better understand deeply why people think how they think. Then only can we be creative and come up with solutions that transcend, that overcome. That's first. The second thing that I would say is that given that there's all these diverse perspectives out there, it is important for us to know what is Singapore's interest, where do we stand, how do we approach issues. It is not about just listening to the diverse perspective and then choose one side and then defend that side, come what may. That's not the point. We are not instruments of other people's quarrels or contests. We need to understand why they are doing what they are doing and bring our own perspective, understand our own interests. Then we don't get caught up in this thing whereby we are used as proxies for other people's quarrel. It doesn't help to, people don't need Singaporeans to be another proxy for that. They can disagree, they can quarrel very well on their own. They don't need our help. If we can value add is to deeply understand why it is so, and more importantly, what constructive role we can play. And these are the instincts, the dispositions that I hope all our students will have growing up, so that in time, these are the instincts and dispositions that we will always have as Singaporeans. That we will respond, react, look at the issue from other people's perspective, understand it deeply, but always making a decision from our own perspective and our own interests. And that is an important part of our education, be it part of national education.
Thank you, Minister. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all things must end, and good things seem to end quicker than other things. And this is the end. So please join me in thanking Minister Chan Chun Sing for being so generous with his time.
Can I make a request? Since I can't here work for free, right? I must make a request. Many of you are very eminent in your respective positions. If you have an interest to partner our schools, if you have interest to contribute to the development of our younger next generation, let us know. In MOE, we have a belief that it takes a whole society to develop our next generation. And for all of you who are very able and capable, I'd like to invite you to partner some of our schools to contribute your knowledge, your perspective to the development of our next generation. And I'm sure if you go to our schools, you talk to them, you inspire them, they will become much more aware of the issues that are close to our hearts. And maybe one day they will join your organization as well. Thank you very much.